Listen up, everyone. Before we get into what might be the most insane quarterback situation in the NFL right now, I need you to do me a solid. We're grinding to hit 1,000 subscribers, and your support makes all the difference. If you're getting real value from this unfiltered content, hit that subscribe button and help us grow. It takes 2 seconds. Now let's talk about what's really going on with Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland, because the numbers tell a story that nobody wants to admit. So here's what we need to talk about. Dillon Gabriel has started 3 games for the Cleveland Browns. 3 games. And in those 3 games, his numbers are absolutely mediocre at best. We're talking 59.8% completion percentage, 546 total passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and he's been sacked 10 times. 10 sacks in 3 games. That's more than 3 sacks per game. And yet, Kevin Stefanski is treating this guy like he's untouchable, like he's so valuable that he can't even come out of the game in a 31-6 blowout. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders is sitting on the bench watching all of this happen and not getting a single opportunity to show what he can do. Let me break down why these numbers are so important, because I think a lot of people don't really understand what they're looking at when they see quarterback stats. 59.8% completion percentage sounds okay until you realize that the league average for starting quarterbacks right now is around 65%. So Gabriel is completing passes at a rate that's significantly below average. That's not good. That's not even acceptable for a veteran quarterback, let alone someone who's supposed to be developing and improving. 546 yards over 3 games works out to 182 yards per game. Let me put that in perspective for you. That's 31st in the NFL among qualified starting quarterbacks. 31st out of 32 teams. There's literally only one starting quarterback in the entire league who's averaging fewer passing yards per game than Dillon Gabriel, and that quarterback is probably on a run-first team or dealing with injuries or in some other situation that explains the low numbers. What's Cleveland's excuse? Now, the 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions might sound good on the surface. People love to talk about touchdown to interception ratio, but here's the thing. 0 interceptions usually means you're not taking chances. It means you're checking down. It means you're playing scared. It means you're so worried about making mistakes that you're not pushing the ball downfield and trying to make big plays. And when you combine that with the low completion percentage and the low yards per game, what you get is a picture of a quarterback who's basically just managing the game and hoping his defense and run game can win it for him. And then there's the sacks. 10 sacks in 3 games is absolutely terrible. That's the kind of number that tells you either the offensive line is completely failing to protect the quarterback, or the quarterback is holding onto the ball too long, or the quarterback isn't reading the defense well enough to know when to get rid of it quickly. Now, I don't watch every Browns snap, so I can't tell you exactly what's causing all these sacks, but I can tell you that elite quarterbacks find ways to avoid sacks even when their offensive line isn't perfect. They have pocket presence, they have internal clocks that tell them when to throw it away or check it down. They process information quickly enough to get the ball out before the rush gets home. Dillon Gabriel is getting sacked more than 3 times per game. That suggests he doesn't have those elite traits. And that's fine. Not every quarterback is elite. But if you're not elite and your numbers are mediocre and you're getting sacked constantly, then you better be winning games at a high level to justify keeping the starting job. And the Browns are 2-5. They're not winning. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL right now. So what exactly is the argument for keeping Gabriel as the unquestioned starter when literally everything about his performance suggests he's not getting the job done? But here's where it gets really crazy. Despite all of these mediocre numbers, despite the Browns losing more than they're winning, despite Gabriel being one of the least productive quarterbacks in the entire league, Kevin Stefanski won't give Shedeur Sanders even a single series in garbage time. Not one snap when the game is already decided. Not one opportunity to get some experience and show what he can do. And according to multiple people who cover this team, it's because Stefanski is afraid that if Sanders goes in and plays well, suddenly people will start asking why the guy with better numbers is sitting on the bench. Think about how insane that is. Your starting quarterback is 31st in the league in passing yards. He's completing less than 60% of his passes. He's getting sacked more than 3 times per game. Your team has 2 wins and 5 losses. And you're so committed to this guy that you won't even evaluate your backup because you're worried he might look better. That's not confidence in your starter. That's fear that you made the wrong choice and you don't want anyone to find out. Now, let me tell you what really bothers me about this situation. The Browns drafted Shedeur Sanders knowing who he is and what he can do. They watched his college tape, they interviewed him, they did their homework, and they decided he was worth a draft pick. So presumably they think he has talent, they think he has potential, they think he could be a good NFL quarterback. Otherwise, why would you draft him? But now that they have him, they won't actually find out if any of that is true. They won't give him practice reps with the starters. They won't play him in games. They won't do anything that might provide evidence that he's actually good. And you know why? Because if they find out he's good, then they have to answer uncomfortable questions about why Dillon Gabriel is starting over him. They have to explain to the fans and the media why they're playing the worst quarterback. They have to justify a decision that suddenly looks really bad. So instead of dealing with any of that, they just keep Sanders buried and hope nobody notices that their starting quarterback is putting up numbers that would get most backups benched. Let's talk about what those numbers really mean in terms of winning football games. When your quarterback is only throwing for 182 yards per game, you're asking your defense to be elite. You're asking your run game to carry the entire offense. You're basically playing 1990s football in 2025, and sometimes that can work if you have a dominant defense and a great offensive line and a bruising run game, but the Browns don't have all of those things. Their defense is okay, but not great. Their run game is decent, but not dominant. So when your quarterback can't throw for more than 200 yards in a game, you're putting your entire team at a massive disadvantage. And the completion percentage is even more concerning because it tells you about accuracy and decision making. When you're completing less than 60% of your passes, it means 1 out of every 2.5 throws is hitting the ground. That's a lot of incomplete passes. That's a lot of drives stalling because you can't convert third downs. That's a lot of opportunities wasted because your quarterback can't consistently put the ball where it needs to be. Now, I'm not trying to pile on Dillon Gabriel as a person. I don't know him. Maybe he's a great guy. Maybe he works hard. Maybe he's doing everything the coaches are asking him to do. But at some point, you have to look at the results and be honest about what you're seeing. And what we're seeing is a quarterback who's not producing at an acceptable level for an NFL starter. That's just facts. Those are his numbers. I'm not making them up or exaggerating them. That's literally what he's done through 3 games. So the question becomes, why is Kevin Stefanski so committed to playing someone who's producing like this? What has Gabriel done to earn such unwavering support from his head coach? Has he won big games? No, the Browns are 2-5. Has he put up impressive statistics? No, he's 31st in passing yards per game. Has he shown flashes of elite talent that suggest he just needs more time? Not really. He's been pretty consistently mediocre across all 3 games. So what is it? And the answer, according to people who cover this team, is that Stefanski made a decision to start Gabriel, and he's too stubborn or too proud or too afraid to reconsider it. He's dug in, he's committed, and now he's gonna ride that decision into the ground rather than admit that maybe it wasn't the right call. That's ego getting in the way of good coaching. That's putting your own reputation ahead of what's best for the team. And that's exactly the kind of thing that keeps franchises like the Browns stuck in mediocrity. Because here's the thing about the NFL, it's a results-oriented business. Nobody cares about your process or your reasoning or your justifications if you're not winning games. And when you're 2-5 with a quarterback who's putting up bottom 5 numbers in the league, you don't have the luxury of refusing to evaluate other options. You don't get to just stick with what you're doing and hope it magically gets better. You have to be willing to make changes when something isn't working. And clearly Dillon Gabriel at quarterback isn't working for the Cleveland Browns. But Stefanski won't make a change, because making a change would be an admission that he was wrong. It would be acknowledging that his evaluation was off. It would be giving ammunition to all the people who questioned the decision from the beginning. So instead, he's just going to keep trotting Gabriel out there week after week, watching him complete 59% of his passes for less than 200 yards while taking 3+ sacks, and telling everyone that this is the best option for the team. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders is sitting there fully healthy, preparing like a starter, according to Myles Garrett, working extra hours with the coaching staff, doing everything right, and not getting a single opportunity. Not even in a game where they're winning by 25 points in the fourth quarter. Not even in a situation where there's literally zero risk and potentially valuable information to be gained. Because Kevin Stefanski has decided that finding out if Sanders is good is more dangerous than continuing to play Gabriel, even though Gabriel's numbers are terrible. Let me put this in terms that might make it even clearer. Imagine you own a business and you have 2 employees who could potentially do an important job. One of them you've been using and they're producing below average results, like measurably, statistically below average. The other one you hired specifically because you thought they had potential, but you've never actually let them try to do the job. Would you keep using the person who's producing poor results without ever giving the other person a chance? Of course not. That would be insane. You'd at least give the other person an opportunity to show what they can do, especially when the person you're currently using is failing. But that's exactly what the Browns are doing. They're sticking with mediocre production from their starter, while refusing to even evaluate whether their backup might be better. And the only explanation that makes sense is that they're more worried about the political fallout of potentially having to change quarterbacks than they are about actually winning football games. Now, let's talk about what 0 interceptions really means in this context, because I think people misunderstand that statistic. Yes, not turning the ball over is important, obviously, but when you're not turning the ball over, and you're also not moving the ball effectively, it usually means you're playing too conservatively. It means you're taking the safe throw every time instead of trying to attack the defense. It means you're checking down to running backs and tight ends instead of pushing the ball downfield to your receivers. And we can see evidence of this in Gabriel's yards per game. 182 yards per game means he's not completing many long passes. He's not taking shots downfield. He's playing a very limited, conservative style of offense, which again, sometimes that's what the game plan calls for. Sometimes you want to shorten the game and rely on your defense and run game. But when you're 2-5, you can't afford to play that way. You need your quarterback to make plays. You need explosive passing plays that move the ball down the field in chunks. You need someone who can put the offense on their back when the run game isn't working or the defense gives up points. Dillon Gabriel hasn't shown he can do any of that, and the 0 interception stat is actually evidence of that limitation rather than evidence of good play. He's not making mistakes because he's not doing anything risky enough to potentially be a mistake. He's playing the safest, most conservative version of quarterback that you can play, and that's why the Browns can't score points consistently. That's why they're losing games, because in the modern NFL, you need your quarterback to be a playmaker, not just a game manager. And here's what really gets under my skin about this whole situation. Shedeur Sanders came into the NFL with a reputation for being confident, for having swagger, for believing in himself, and there were concerns from some scouts and executives that maybe he was too confident, that maybe his personality would be a problem. But you know what? When you look at what he's actually done in Cleveland, he's been the model backup. He's not complaining. He's not demanding trades. He's not causing locker room problems. He's working his tail off and waiting for his opportunity. He's doing everything the quote-unquote right way. And it still doesn't matter, because Kevin Stefanski has decided that Dillon Gabriel is his guy, regardless of what the numbers say and regardless of whether there might be a better option on the roster. That's not coaching based on performance. That's coaching based on stubbornness. And it's exactly the kind of decision making that leads to coaches getting fired when their teams don't win enough games. Let me give you another number that I think really illustrates the problem here. The Browns are averaging 17.6 points per game this season. That's 30th in the NFL, 30th out of 32 teams. There are only 2 offenses in the entire league that are scoring fewer points than Cleveland, and the primary reason for that is that they can't move the ball through the air effectively. When your quarterback is completing less than 60% of his passes for less than 200 yards per game, you're not going to score many points. It's that simple. So you would think that a coaching staff that's struggling to score points would be desperate to try anything that might help. You'd think they'd be willing to give their backup quarterback some reps to see if maybe he can provide a spark. You'd think they'd be open to any ideas that might help them put more points on the board. But apparently not. Apparently Kevin Stefanski is so confident in his process and his decision making that the team being 30th in scoring doesn't shake his belief that Dillon Gabriel gives them the best chance to win. That's either remarkable confidence or complete delusion. And given the results, I'm leaning toward delusion, because you can't look at these numbers and honestly say that things are going well. You can't watch Gabriel get sacked 3 times a game and complete less than 60% of his passes and think, yeah, this is fine. We don't need to change anything, unless you're so invested in your original decision that you literally can't see what's right in front of you. And this is where the Shedeur Sanders part of the story becomes so frustrating, because maybe he wouldn't be better than Gabriel. Maybe he'd go in and struggle just as much or worse. That's possible. Nobody knows for sure because he's never played. But the point is that you should want to find out. When your offense is 30th in the league in scoring and your quarterback's numbers are mediocre across the board, you should be actively looking for ways to improve. And one of the most obvious ways to potentially improve is to see if your backup quarterback might give you more production than your starter. But Stefanski won't do it, and according to the reporting, it's specifically because he's worried about creating a quarterback controversy. He's worried that if Sanders plays well, even in garbage time, suddenly there will be questions about why he's not playing more. There will be debates about who should start. There will be pressure to make a change, and Stefanski doesn't want to deal with any of that. He wants to stick with his plan and not have to answer difficult questions about whether it's working. That's coaching from a place of fear and insecurity. That's prioritizing your own comfort over your team's success. And that's exactly the kind of leadership that produces 2-5 records and bottom tier offenses. Because when you're more worried about avoiding controversy than you are about winning games, you make bad decisions. You stick with things that aren't working because changing them would be uncomfortable. You ignore opportunities that might help because taking advantage of them might force you to admit you were wrong about something. The 10 sacks in 3 games stat is particularly damning because it shows up on film. You can't hide it. Everyone watching can see Gabriel getting pressured and hit and sacked. And while some of that is certainly on the offensive line, a significant portion of it is on the quarterback. Good quarterbacks have pocket presence. They feel pressure and move within the pocket to avoid it. They have quick releases that get the ball out before rushers can get home. They recognize blitzes and hot routes and make adjustments at the line. Gabriel is getting sacked at a rate that suggests he's lacking in some or all of those areas. And that's concerning because those are fundamental quarterback skills. Those aren't things that you can really teach someone at the NFL level. Either you have the instincts and awareness to avoid sacks or you don't. And through 3 games, Gabriel has shown that he doesn't, which means this problem is likely to continue as long as he's the starter. But again, Stefanski isn't interested in exploring whether someone else might handle pressure better. He's committed to Gabriel, and that's that, even though the evidence is piling up that Gabriel might not be the answer, even though every statistical category shows below average or worse production. Even though the team is losing more than it's winning, none of that matters because Stefanski made a decision and he's gonna stick with it no matter what. And you know who suffers in this situation? The players. The offensive linemen who are getting blamed for sacks that might not be entirely their fault. The receivers who aren't getting opportunities to make plays because the ball isn't being thrown downfield. The defense that has to play with a short field because the offense keeps going 3 and out. And most of all, Shedeur Sanders, who's doing everything right and not getting any opportunities because his coach is too stubborn to admit that maybe his evaluation wasn't perfect. This is the kind of situation that breeds resentment in a locker room when players can see that something isn't working, but the coaching staff refuses to make changes. It creates doubt. Guys start wondering if the coaches actually know what they're doing. They start questioning the decision making. They start losing faith in the process. And once that happens, once you lose the locker room, it's almost impossible to get it back. Now, I don't know if that's happened in Cleveland yet. I don't have inside sources telling me that players are unhappy, but I do know that when you're 2-5 and your offense is 30th in scoring and your quarterback is putting up bottom 5 numbers, people are paying attention. Players aren't stupid. They can see what's happening. They know that Gabriel isn't playing well. They know that Sanders is working hard in practice, and they're probably wondering why there isn't even a competition for the starting job. The completion percentage, the yards per game, the sacks, the lack of touchdowns, the conservative play calling, all of it points to the same conclusion. Dylan Gabriel is not playing well enough to justify being the unquestioned starter. He might be a fine backup. He might be a decent stopgap if you need someone to fill in for a few games. But as the long-term starter for a team that's trying to win football games, the numbers say no. The results say no. The record says no. And yet Kevin Stefanski keeps trotting him out there week after week, keeps giving him all the practice reps, keeps refusing to even consider whether there might be a better option on the roster, because admitting there might be a better option would mean admitting he made a mistake. And apparently that's worse than continuing to lose games with subpar quarterback play. This is what happens when ego gets involved in coaching decisions. When you care more about being right than about winning. When you're so invested in your own evaluation that you can't objectively look at what's actually happening on the field. And it's the players who pay the price. The players who work their tails off all week only to lose on Sunday because the quarterback isn't good enough. The players who do their jobs but can't overcome deficiencies at the most important position. Shedeur Sanders deserves better than this. He deserves a chance to compete. He deserves an opportunity to show whether he can play at this level. Instead, he's stuck behind a quarterback who's completing 59.8% of his passes for 182 yards per game while taking more than 3 sacks per game. And his coach won't give him a single snap in garbage time because he's afraid of what might happen if Sanders actually plays well. That's not a recipe for success. That's not how you build a winning organization. That's how you stay mediocre year after year, making the same mistakes over and over while convincing yourself that you're doing everything right. And until something changes, until Kevin Stefanski is willing to objectively evaluate his quarterback situation based on performance rather than pride, the Browns are going to keep getting the same results they've been getting. 2-5 records, bottom tier offense, mediocre quarterback play, and a talented backup sitting on the bench wondering what he has to do to get an opportunity. If you made it all the way through this breakdown, I appreciate you. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Are Gabriel's numbers good enough to keep the starting job? Should Sanders get a chance to compete? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.